Hello, everyone, and welcome back from our short break. So we have made it to the final session of the event. We are very excited to have you here with us still today after 3 great days. And for this session, we are going to be focusing the conversation around electronic marketplaces. So in this session, you will hear from a few case studies and panelists, and then there will be a facilitated discussion led by our very special guest moderator, Blandine Wu Chebili. Blandine is a senior procurement specialist in the governance procurement global practice at the World Bank. She supports e-procurement projects design and implementation in several Francophone countries. She also provides fiduciary support to several global trust fund financed projects. Before joining the bank in 2016, Blandine worked for the African Development Bank for 14 years in Tunisia as a telecom officer, an IT expert, and a procurement specialist. She has worked for more than 16 years in the private sector in France as an ICT trainer, architect, and engineer. She holds a PhD in ICT and a master's in public administration and another master's in geography. Thank you so much, Blandine, for being with us. And you will now introduce our 3 panelists. Take it away. Oh, I think you might be on mute. Oh, we do not hear you. And we do not have you spotlighted. Can our digital team please spotlight? Hello there. Yes. Can our digital team please spotlight Blandine? There. We do not hear you, Blandine. It doesn't seem you're muted. I do not hear you. Does anyone else hear her? Galia, a quick test. You can nod your head if you do.
No, I can't hear Blandine. Someone needs to unmute her.
The production team can also not hear her as well. Blandine, it's possible that in the microphone settings where you see the mute button on the Zoom application, if you click on the little arrow that is right next to it, you can select a microphone. It's possible that the correct microphone was not selected. And thank you for those of you from the audience for confirming. We still do not hear you. Take a look at that, and while you look at that and take a look at your settings, I am going to introduce some of your panelists, and then you can take it from there. This will buy you a little time there. So the first panelist that we're excited to have is Leela Mallory, and Leela Mallory is a senior procurement specialist with the Asian Development Bank. A lawyer by training, Leela started her career as a solicitor in Australian legal firms, followed by a move to procurement, joining UNOPS in the Palestinian territory. Leela has wide international procurement experience with the Food and Agricultural Organization, International Development Law Organization, and Inter-American Development Bank. Leela was instrumental to ADB's procurement support to the Republic of the Philippines in procuring emergency food supplies and procurement, supply, and delivery of COVID-19 laboratory. We are also excited to have Daniel Sanchez. Daniel Sanchez is an international public procurement expert with over 20 years of experience in international development. Based in Washington, D.C., he works as a senior public procurement consultant at the Inter-American Development Bank, where he supports several programs in Latin America and the Caribbean focused on the application of new technologies for electronic government procurement. His most recent project involved developing digital tools to facilitate the provision of critical supplies related to the COVID-19 pandemic in Argentina. Mr. Sanchez has carried out postgraduate studies on digital innovation at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and public financial management at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government. Hello, yes.
I'm so sorry. Go ahead, please.
All right, perfect timing. So I will let you introduce Safiullah, and then you take it from there.
Yes, thank you very much. Just the time for me to catch up with the screen, if you do not mind. And then, yes, now I think, I'm very sorry for this technical issues with my laptop. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. I'm very sorry about this. So thank you very much, Roger, for catching up on this technical last time issues. Okay, I catch up, I'm sorry. So I'm very pleased to be the moderator for this timely and important session on e-marketplace because we are very fortunate today to have three different views and perspectives on these topics from three distinguished speakers. So Roger has already presented our colleague from the Asian Development Bank. We have also an independent international public procurement expert, Daniel, and the director of the National Procurement Authority of Afghanistan. So Safiullah Kamawal is the director of the electronic procurement for the National Procurement Authority in Afghanistan. He drives the use of technology for enhanced efficiency and transparency in public spending and to create digital trust by connecting various sectors from government, private sector, and civil societies. He has led digital transformation in 72 government entities to open up contract data and promote public-led monitoring of infrastructure contracts. As part of the government's self-reliance policy, Kamawal also pioneered the introduction of electronic tendering systems in Afghanistan. Kamawal believes firmly that with a strong electronic procurement system, Afghanistan can have a better future with efficiency, transparency, and accountability ruling over bureaucratic, vague, and ambiguous public spending endeavors. Kamawal has a master in business administration, a bachelor in engineering, and holds a diploma in IT. Kamawal, over to you. Thank you.
Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, we can see and hear you.
Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Peace be upon you all. And thank you for the ADB inviting us here to present jobs. The government of Islamic Republic of Afghanistan had special attention to the procurement reforms, and part of those reform initiatives, the National Procurement Authority, or NPA in short, introduced an e-procurement system called jobs. It stands for the Afghanistan Electronic and Open Procurement System. In the next 20 or 25 minutes, I would like to share with you our experience with this e-procurement system and what we learned about digital procurement transformation, especially in the uncertainty areas. For those who are not so familiar with the country procurement system, I will provide you with the broad overview first. Afghanistan is a country at the heart of Asia on the old Silk Road, actually the original Silk Road connecting South Asia to the Central Asia. Primarily, the country has a centralized governance model with 72 procuring entities. This includes ministries and authorities at the national level. Administratively, the country has 34 provinces, which they also have small purchasing powers. It's less than about $6,500 US, with some exceptions. Although there are some small purchasing powers with the provinces and public hospitals and other actors in the public sphere, but the main public buyers remain the 72 procuring entities. We have started reforming public financial management system in 2002, including procurement as a common government function, but focused on procurement reforms as a strategic function of government since last 6 years. It's the time when the National Procurement Authority and the National Procurement Commission are established. The National Procurement Authority is established in 2014 within the Administrative Office of the President as a central body responsible for national procurement policy, facilitation, and monitoring stuff. And the National Procurement Commission is also established at the same year and is comprised of high-ranked government officials chaired by His Excellency, the President of Islamic Republic of Afghanistan, to lead procurement reforms and approve high-value contracts. NPA and NPC was able to bring about legislative, institutional, and technological reforms and to save more than 66 billion Fs, which is around 900 million US dollars since its establishment. I would suggest visiting NPA website shown on the screen right now to get a deep insight into the procurement reforms in Afghanistan, and I will turn into the e-procurement itself. Sorry. The National Procurement Authority launched the first version of AJOPS 2 years back as part of the first National Conference on Public Procurement. The system, you see the first National Conference on Public Procurement, it means procurement function is still very young in the country. This system is then implemented in all 72 procuring entities to serve as a single window for public procurement in Afghanistan. We are thankful to the World Bank on their generous support along the way towards having the jobs. And the government puts particular emphasis on enhancing transparency in public procurement to promote a level playing field for suppliers and achieve value for money in government operations. A large range of procurement information is publicly available through AJOPS, basically opened. And we will discuss how open they are a bit later. AJOPS provide a centralized publication of Afghan government business opportunities, annual procurement plans, notices of intentions to award, and contract notices, which is the award decisions itself, and information on downstream contract implementation. It also publishes a comprehensive list of administrative review decisions and companies' debarment decisions in addition to the list of registered companies. Information on all decisions made by the National Procurement Commission, the NPC, are also published on timely manner through AJOPS. There are dashboards as well available for public use to analyze trends and explore the big picture if they want to. And most importantly, the National Procurement Law and Procurement Rules of Procedures makes it mandatory for procuring entities to publish various types of procurement information on AJOPS, which help us along the institutionalization process. AJOPS was the first in the region to adopt open contracting data standard. Today, we have more than 4,500 contracts data open through AJOPS. This means a lot for Afghanistan. It covers 90% of public contracts active in 2019 and 2020. We are going to open, but actually we're opening 258 data points about each contract alone, especially on the downstream implementation part. It's accessible freely online. It is also available in JSON format for download. And most importantly, you can freely reuse and redistribute all these through open APIs available at ocds.ajops.net. And we're actually thankful to the Open Contracting Partnership, especially Mr. Hyman and Ms. Carey here as right now, and the OC Help Desk for their continuous support on this matter. I would like to show you a contract information which is being published through AJOPS as a demonstration, if you allow me to do that. This is the front page of AJOPS. If, for example, we want to see any information about the procurement plans, bid announcements, and whatever part of the procurement. For example, we are coming to contract progress. And here you see the same number, which is published. And here are the list of the contracts. If we click one of them, you see the basic information about the contract right here. And there is, for example, the payments information, which is represented in a chart format. This poor vendor did not receive any payment. And this is freely available. There is a disbursement performance index as well, calculated based on the CPI measures. Cost performance index. We also have, for example, contracts physical progress and the schedule performance index. You can play around all those, but including the contract documents. If you come down here, this is the JSON format part. You can download it. This is fully compliant with Open Contracting Data Standard format, the latest version. And you can download these all those things. You can access other, for example, any NPC commission decision on this specific project. If you click this one, you go to the commission and you see that there are 4 decisions already made about this specific project. If I go back, you're finally user views and opinions. Using a social media account, you can comment and put anything for the attention of the public officials. You also have dashboards right here, which gives you a comprehensive and an overview of the overall procurement. Like, you can play around these, going to ajobs.net and finding your area of interest over there. So that was only like a brief introduction to an overview of what was open through ajobs. And yes, for the COVID-19, the government formed an emergency response committee and took some important steps to cope with the situation. Plus, we built a very specific page to monitor projects on ajobs, the COVID-19 projects on ajobs. Sorry. Then we immediately dedicated a page on ajobs to share information on high-value contracts procured in response to COVID impacts. Its information is again published in compliance with OCDS, means maximum transparency, and these do not include those contracts procured by provincial governors, which are the small purchases, although their purchasing power is increased in order to respond properly to COVID-19. What is important during COVID-19, the government desperately required an electronic mean for public procurement. The interest and will to adopt electronic procurement solution was very high, although we could not make it at the early days, but finally we were able to launch the electronic tendering system very recently. We piloted the system for infrastructure projects in 3 procuring entities, taking advantage of the maturity and readiness of construction industry in the country. We built a very good cooperation with chambers of commerces and the Afghan Builders Associations. It was nearly not possible to address without their cooperation. One electronic tender is at the awarding stage right now, and a few more electronic tenders are being announced recently. Three important considerations here is that first, we launched the e-tendering system before introducing a comprehensive e-procurement regulations and even before the country's e-transaction law. We developed a tiny rules of procedures and asked permission from the NPC, which is the highest authority on the procurement sphere in the country, meaning you can start your own AGP for those who are not yet started, long before having a sophisticated body of legislation in place, as many other countries do. Second, the country has a poor digital ecosystem to encourage e-government projects. To encourage is important. There is no national certification authority for digital signatures, for example, nor national public key infrastructure services available, which we outsourced. And this means poor country digital infrastructure must not bring reformers back from introducing e-procurement system. There are always alternative ways. And third, this gradual introduction of EGP element was a good practice to ease in change management through procuring entities and gradually create a sense of ownership in government officials. In most cases, going digital is not the hardest part, but the real challenge is its transformation. I mean, the software is easy, and but the real implementation and the change management part is the harder part. I would like to show you an announced tender on the e-tendering portal. Just to this is the e-tendering portal, these 3 projects, and there are other project which is, I cannot say announced, but it's a single source project processed through e-tendering as well. This one, we already opened the bids, and it's in the evaluation near the award stage right now. You can see if you're a vendor, or you can not do anything because it's already closed. But for the open contracts, for the open bids, tenders, like this one, if you're a vendor, you can submit a bid online. But now I'm using this as a public user. It only shows to me that what was planned and how it is actually implemented. For example, this specific process was late 49 days in initiation, and then they made further delays to make it 83 days delay in the announcement of the bid. And here you have a countdown for the submission, just like other regular electronic procurement system. Anyhow, the electronic tendering system right here with us, it composes 8 major steps. Before the procurement actually starts, it has to be planned in the procurement planning management system as part of the annual procurement planning process, or might be as an ad hoc. Connecting e-tendering to the procurement planning system will increase the effectiveness and visibility of procurement plan implementation. The first stage is to initiate a procurement. A procurement specialist completes all required documents and information, including its budget, technical specification, etc. All these will be entered into the system and approved electronically by the awarding authority, like the minister, in order for the procurement to proceed. In the next stage, the specialist draft the request for bid or proposal or whatever in a little bit modified ESBD, but nothing need physical signatures and markings and all those stuff we need for the manual procurement. They will also be approved electronically. Bid openers will also be assigned anonymously to this bid by the awarding authority. And now it's the bid preview. Right here, the vendors can see the bids and its contents. It's much like the regular manual documents. They can ask online for clarifications. They receive in system notifications, also email notifications for all amendments and government clarifications, pre-bid meeting minutes, and also the site visit reports. They're also available for vendors at any time they want to. The bid opener should confirm their assignment by entering their public key for this specific project. When you go to the bid submission, they will confirm using, the vendor will confirm, or the bidder will confirm using a one-time password OTP received by their formal email. The bid will be encrypted then using multiple secured algorithms and using public key infrastructure. Then the bid opening are also online. Vendors can see the results in real time. I'm sorry for the local language demonstration going on the screen. And at the sixth step, the assigned evaluation committee enters evaluation report and create proposed contracts that implied by the result of bid evaluation. So the contracts are created like in an electronic way. The evaluation report is also approved online by the awarding authority. If a negotiation is taking place, its report is also entered and approved online. In addition to this, we have mainstream awarding process, which comprises of offer and acceptance. And in addition to that, we have another step of NPC approval, especially for the higher value contracts. This approval takes place manually for the time being, and just the results are entered into the system. And at the end, the contract will be signed manually. This is the only document need a physical signature. Fortunately, the e-transaction law is newly enacted, based upon which we will be able to sign the contract as electronic, inshallah, mid next year. So this system is designed in a way that it guides the user along the process. They only view those activities that lies under their authority. The users are alerted throughout in the through in-system notifications, also through email notifications to be informed. And some processes will send you a second and third reminder as well to make sure that you're not forgetting to move the process forward. Apart from the mainstream procurement process, the vendors are able to ask, for example, for a debriefing and also for to file their complaints online during the standstill period, for example, which will then be reviewed by the administrative review committee. Similarly, the government official can send online request for debarment to the debarment committee. These two options, the e-appeals and the e-debarment, are currently available for the e-tenders only, and will extend it to the manual tenders, so that even manual tenders processes will enjoy the e-appeals and e-debarment function. And yes, we are in the process to enhance the platform for publishing upstream data as well. I mean the tendering data as well, in a coordinated way in accordance with OCDS. Although there are actually stakeholders appreciated the transformative potential of OC to contribute in crystallization of the government black box and increase government legitimacy. However, the commercial and technological impact of OC are yet to be appreciated. This all starts with a mandatory for every company to get a WPIN. WPIN stands for Vendor Procurement Identification Number. It takes 5 to 10 minutes, submitting about 13 points of data. And when you receive that one, you can then participate in all tendering procedures, electronic tendering procedures. So that was EJOBS. And like in other countries, the global pandemic of this year rushed to prove the value of e-procurement more than transparency and efficiency. It is now like a must-to-have tool for us, after it was a good-to-have tool in public procurement in Afghanistan. Fortunately, the reform of e-procurement is clearly one of the most effective and efficient reforms undertaken in the last decade in Afghanistan. It has also been well received by procuring entities, the private sector, the international community, and there is a great political will for the digital procurement transformation. But the real challenge is the change management and transformation part, which we need to work together. It is easy to tell the computer how to develop a software for us. And yesterday we saw how techies can take advantage of artificial intelligence to develop sophisticated e-procurement systems, actually the software. But it is really hard to tell a human being to do e-procurement. I mean the transformation part. And we also continuously working with other relevant e-government initiatives around the country to be integrated with the jobs. Today, this system is integrated with a national business registry called ICBR and national tax system called SIGTAS to bring about more efficiency and transparency, and also help about revenue collection, improve the performance of revenue collection. One final thing to say is that jobs is built in-house with indigenous Afghan capacity. Yes, and we will always remember Dr. Paul Schapper and Dr. Ram, who presented the last presentation on concession in procurement, who provided very thoughtful advice throughout the process. But the system is being developed and administered in-house, which we believe is a cost-efficient solution based on the principles of National Digital Foundation Strategy. Thank you. Thank you everyone for your time and attention, and you can reach me using this email and phone number shown on the screen, and if any question, I'm here to elaborate. Over to you, Blendine.
Thank you very much, Kamal, for your very inspiring presentation. Indeed, having 90% of contracts published should increase transparency, accountability, and will surely help to tackle corruption. Yeah, Jobs web portal, I've looked at it and it's really impressive. I think that the success of this initiative in Afghanistan can inspire many FCV countries, low-income countries, and even middle-income countries. And now I invite participants having questions or comments for Kamal to use the Q&A or the chat features in the Zoom application. Now I'm going to introduce our next presentation. In our daily life, most of us have already used an e-marketplace system. Indeed, it is a virtual space that provides infrastructure services for buyers and sellers to meet and conduct business transactions online, and where product or service information is provided by the multiple third parties. Daniel, who has been already introduced by Roger, will present now an in-depth understanding of e-marketplace platform and its potential for public procurement. Daniel, over to you, please.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Galia. Thanks, Blandine, for the opportunity of participating on this panel. It's an honor to me to participate in this conference and to recognize so many faces that we saw here in Washington, D.C. 2 years ago at the GPPC conference that we organized here at the IDB. I also recognize some of my old colleagues here at the IDB, so it's even more interesting to me to present some of the things I work with them and how we've been advancing in our region. Today, I'm going to discuss very briefly how e-marketplace platforms are becoming a potential solution for public procurement, how they can increase our efficiency and solve some of the problems that the countries that have reached certain critical mass of development in their EGP systems are facing. But first, and very rapidly, I want to talk about the institution I represent, which is the Inter-American Development Bank, just so you get familiar with what we do and what we are. We were established in 1959. We were the first regional MDB. Just like the ADB, we contribute to accelerate economic and social development in our region, and we're the main source of development funding for our region. We have 48 member countries, 26 borrowing, 22 donor. Our last edition has been China in 2007. We have a very varied shareholding, but some Asian countries hold up to 5% of our shareholders. And we're very proud of the fact that half of our shareholding stays in our region, and it belongs to beneficiary countries from Latin America and the Caribbean. As part of our portfolio, we have a sector called Institutions for Development, with a very important portfolio for reform and modernization of the state of just under $3.5 billion a year, which is part of the portfolio that is geared and targeted towards the reform of expenditure systems, in this case, public procurement. And that's the area where I work, and that's the area that we're going to touch today. To begin with, I think it's very fair for all the participants and all the other panelists to see where EGPs in Latin America have a little bit of a snapshot of where our region is. Our region has had a couple of waves of development that started in the mid-90s and have followed through almost the 2020, of course, stalled by the COVID pandemic. But as you can see, we had a first wave, especially in South and Central America, fueled by in-house developments, very hard developments, very strenuous in terms of capacity building and development of process and adoption of the systems, but successful nonetheless. And now we're experiencing a second wave of developments, mostly fueled by our Caribbean countries and based on off-the-shelf solutions. What are the percentages in our region? We have up to 30-something% of our countries already have transactional systems. Half of them have interactive systems. A little bit over 20% have just informational systems. And a little over 10% of our countries in the region don't have a system or portal just yet. And we have a variety. If you want to go into depth, I suggest the Robot Publications, where we develop a chapter for Latin American. But this is a summary of all the functionalities and all the modules that our systems have and how many countries do it. As you can see, as probably it's replicated in the Asia region, announcing tenders is something that's well adopted and well disseminated, but the ex-post contract management is just a functional that very few countries have currently in our EGP systems in Latin America. So today I want to discuss a little bit about the e-marketplaces. Is that the next evolution of EGP? That's a very controversial. It comes with a lot of questions, with a lot of challenges, and a lot of, particularly I would say, myths and a lot of misconceptions on the part both of governments and of the private sector as well. To begin with, is when we think about a marketplace, most of our procurement directors immediately tend to refer to some conversations they had with private sector suppliers, Amazon, or regionally, your region, Rakuten and Alibaba. We also have Mercado Libre, Overstock, and regional smaller marketplaces. And the pitch these companies do to our governments is simply, why do you need an EGP? Just buy everything from us. We can put any control you want. We can gear our system towards every rule you have in place. We can adapt our system to your regulations and to your norms. And your public purchasers can just get anything at the best prices because we guarantee the best prices. You don't have to worry about catalog. You don't have to worry about inventory. You don't have to worry about the supply chain. And there can be some truth to that. But we don't want to see the e-marketplace evolution of our EGP systems into just an outsourcing, a question of if we outsource or not, if we're ready to outsource or not. This has been a question that has gained a lot of relevance since the US government has signed an agreement to outsource their micro-purchasing to Amazon and Overstock.com here in the US. But we are developing a set of guidelines and best practices to adopt in marketplaces that don't necessarily have to do with the simple outsourcing to these major operators that are just trying to extend their market. In an ideal world, when we talk about e-marketplaces in public procurement, we like to think about a few that are starting to appear in our region: the Mercado Público from Chile, Chile Compra, Very interesting things that Panama Compra in Panama is doing right now with their micro purchasing. And of course, in your region, you have excellent examples like government e-marketplace in India, which we think it's very advanced and a great best practice to follow. And this, I think, should be definitely our goal. The goal now should be a dialogue on how do I work with Amazon? How do I work with Alibaba to get better sourcing? The dialogue, the technical aspects that we should be discussing at the level of procurement entities is how do I develop e-marketplaces that add value to my public purchasers, add efficiency, improve my controls, and of course, generate savings. It is interesting the kind of like job we've done in the past, I would say 10 to 20 years, depending on the region and the country. We've started with portals. Our big thing was to have a place where our public purchasers can advertise their bidding processes. Then we aim for interaction, and those were the second generation systems, which it was great. They could submit proposals, they can register, they can download information. And finally, transaction, like we saw in that great presentation from Afghanistan that I really enjoyed, where you're doing awarding, you're doing evaluation. There's actually a transactional component where money and contracts and goods and services are being exchanged. Deals are being made through an electronic platform. But that has really been like climbing the Everest in terms of institutional effort for some countries. The amount of budget, the amount of technical assistance, the amount of capacity building, and the amount of effort to expand the systems and to make sure the systems are adopted government-wide has been tremendous over the past decade or two. Unfortunately, the next step, if this, we can use the analogy of climbing the Everest, going into an e-marketplace logic and business model for a procurement entity for a country is as good as traveling to the moon. It's a really big effort, and once you do it, there's really a point of no return. And for that, you need to gear your institution, your human capital, your budgetary resources, and the fundamental way you do business in public procurement if you're going to undertake a marketplace. And as you see, the benefits are not insignificant. You could have real marketplaces where you don't have to worry about cataloging. You have a very fruitful market where public purchases on real time find the best prices on the best products. You have the automation of menial process like the updating of your catalog. I don't know any country who's thrilled about having to update or having to clean their catalog. There's a lot of hidden savings that you're going to find through doing that. And fraud detection and any effort anti-corruption are very easy to do once you have all that in place. So kind of what are the conditions and how do we get there, or how do we see if we're ready to get there? Another thing I want you to take from this analogy is that if you haven't climbed the Everest, and if you don't have an expertise built to climb the Everest, and if you haven't done it a couple of times proficiently, and you're ready to do it as many times as needed, getting to the moon is going to be a very unrealistic endeavor. In Latin America, we've discovered that 80% of the process just amount to 10% of the total amount of procurement, and that we're under $2,000 per process. So very small purchasing, very high number of purchasing was taking a lot of resources with little impact. So 80% of the public purchasing resources or capacity is being used on very menial and standard procurement, and there was very little left for the big strategic procurement. And if there was a time where we felt that was definitely the COVID pandemic, when we had to worry about very specific and highly technical medical supplies, and even countries as developed as Chile, Brazil, Mexico, and Panama that have a tradition of doing a lot of framework agreements, at some point didn't have the capacity, or the framework agreements were not comprehensive enough to deal with the demand they had. So there's a lot of inefficiency in public procurement, at least in our region, in what is the micro purchasing. To us, that's a perfect place to start enabling the logic of an e-marketplace. And before we go into the preconditions, I want you to picture the virtual stores that we handle now for the framework agreements, so those countries who have become proficient at doing framework agreements. If you do a framework agreement for medical supplies that has a virtual store where you put all the items and all the goods that are processed through that framework agreement. But that framework agreement is directly related to a contractual agreement with a set of suppliers within this framework agreement. And the virtual store ends when this framework agreement ends. Sometimes these framework agreements are more comprehensive and talk about all the supplies of a hospital. Sometimes these framework agreements are only pharmaceuticals. Sometimes these framework agreements are divided in two, like what happened in COVID. You have the very technical machinery like respirators on one framework agreement, and you have another one where you would have just the an e-marketplace would be a place and a platform that is not bound to the time and quantity restrictions of a framework agreement. It would be a platform and a place where all framework agreements coexist, and where the public purchaser of a hospital can go and can start buying items for the hospital independent of what framework agreement is supplying them or what virtual store they belong to. And that's a little bit of a panacea. That's a little bit of a goal to aim. And we need to remember that that's not something easy to buy. That's not something easy to outsource, as we're going to see in a future slide. And finally, that's something that you need where I can just deploy that the goods and services hired by framework agreements, where a public purchaser can buy them, no different than what you buy an item on Amazon, where you really don't know where it's coming from. You just know it's going to be sourced at certain conditions and price. A public entity will have to have a very high capacity in the deployment of framework agreements. They would have to have a history of them, have human capital devoted to it, have very strong technological practice towards the management and deployment of virtual stores. They also going to have a critical mass of virtual stores for framework agreements. Some countries are very good at 5 or 6 framework agreements. In Latin America, we have examples of countries that have specialized in fuel framework agreements and airline ticket framework agreements, and they're very proficient at that. But they only have 3 or 4 items in their virtual stores. While we have other countries that are already at the 100,000 number of items in their virtual stores, which is very interesting to us, because those are countries that are reaching critical mass in their virtual stores through their framework agreements to start thinking about e-marketplace. Then the part that most countries don't have very well developed, and it's something a bit of optional, the catalog. You have to have a very cleaned and highly developed catalog, which is not necessarily the case. Our catalogs in our region, some of them look more like a Christmas trees, with more branches and more items and more things are starting to hang from our branches more and more, and they look more like Frankenstein trees than really clean and streamlined catalogs. I think, I'm not sure what's happening in the Asia region, but there's a big movement in Latin America to start deviating a little bit from the UN catalog and trying to learn more of what's being done in Europe, as the European Union has a very streamlined catalog for all their goods and services. Also, you have to have a transactional EGP system that is widely adopted. If only and if all of your central government and major public purchasing agencies have a very high capacity in managing their procurement through a transactional system, a very high level EGP system, they're going to be able to function under a logic of a marketplace. If you don't have your EGP system widely adopted by your central government, it's going to be unlikely you're going to be able to switch to any marketplace logic. It's going to be easy to outsource to Amazon. So now we do our small purchase in Amazon. Here's your credit card. But that's going to create a lot of operational and monitoring problems that you don't want as a procurement monitoring and oversight entity. We calculated that in Latin America, that if the cost of a procurement process is starting to get over $300 per procurement process, you need to start thinking about efficiencies. And one of them is start bundling things up and doing some centralized procurement, whether it's through framework agreements, through cooperative procurement, through, depending on the amount of the procurement, maybe you are ready to streamline your micro purchasing regime. And finally, of course, you need some regulatory space that is going to let you pilot some things, or at least a regulatory sandbox that is going to allow you to start thinking about how do I implement any marketplace and how I start bundling things into virtual stores and how I create my little public Amazon. And those are some preconditions that we have started to identify, and once we develop our full guidelines, they will have a full list of. Now, the benefits are many. First of all, the operational efficiency. As you have a platform that can easily deploy cloud computing and AI. This is an interesting proposition for a lot of our procurement entities. One, the terms of efficiency. Managing framework agreement and managing micro purchasing regimes is very intensive, both in capital and in human resources. There's a lot of price referencing to be done. There's a lot of negotiating with suppliers. There's a quality control of the processes. There's a lot of evaluation to be done. There's a lot of knowledge in the market that unfortunately gets lost. And if we would have an e-marketplace platform, you can deploy, for example, artificial intelligence engines to do price referencing. Price referencing now in many of our countries is done manually, quote unquote. People going to Amazon, people going to Mercado Libre, people going through a lot of different places. Some people go to the office supply store in the corner and start getting some prices from there, and they kind of eyeball a price they feel comfortable to do, and you put it in the system as price reference. Some countries are starting to work in more developed price reference systems, like Brazil, that is using tax information to see how much people have actually paid for certain goods and services to their tax declarations, and use that as a more accurate price referencing system, but that's very intensive in human capital. But Chile is going to start to experiment with artificial intelligence this year and piloting if an artificial intelligence engine could find optimal prices in the market that can be used for price referencing, and eventually govern the prices that could happen in their incipient marketplace. So that's a very interesting proposition. Anything that involves cloud computing creates a lot of efficiency, especially for federal countries. Argentina is a country that buys the same goods and services from the same suppliers in 23 different provinces, and they all pay 23 different prices to the same supplier and have 23 different delivery dates and 23 different levels of quality and quantities in what they negotiate with the same supplier. Their catalog, their products different, and they operate from province to province very differently. And most of the reason is not even inefficiency, it's simple lack of communication, as they don't have national registries for prices, for supplier registries, because they don't have the cloud infrastructure to do it, or they don't have the institutional incentives to do it. If you have a marketplaces, you store everything on the cloud, and you have a national catalog that you don't need to be tweaking, and a box of pencils with certain characteristics is going to be taken the same in the north, in the southeast, or west of your country. One that's very interesting is the streamlining of data mining for control and transparency. E-marketplaces are excellent at doing reporting, so you don't have to create special modules, special observatories. All you have to worry is to have some sort of built-in capacity in your procurement agency to develop dashboards, and you can have real-time information on what's happening in your marketplace. And finally, you can have better control of purchasers and suppliers. Although some of our EGP systems have that built in now, e-marketplaces by nature work under a logic of feedback, like we do in Amazon when we rate a supplier or we leave a comment on a particular product, we leave a review on that. That's the logic that guarantees certain levels of quality in the marketplace, and we would have to adopt that so we would have an excellent way to control quality on both a purchaser and a supplier. Finally, I want to address a few challenges and cons against buying into this marketplace. I don't want to call it a fad or a trend, but definitely a new force in what it is, introduction of technologies into public procurement. The big dilemma is, do I develop my own platform with many tools that are there in the market, or I outsource this to Alibaba, Rakuten, or any other provider out there and call it a day?
Daniel, I think we've lost you. Can you hear us?
I
Yeah,
think we're going to miss out on his final thought. Yeah, he lost connection.
I think we've lost Daniel, and it was really...
Hello, I think I lost
Yes.
connection for a second.
Okay,
I
please go ahead.
Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, we still can see your screen.
Excellent. Well, as I was saying, if you choose your development, you have to go once again to our age-old dilemma between, do I develop my e-marketplace in-house or I buy it from a supplier? There's companies like Magenta, Shopify, and 20 others that are coming every day, BigCommerce, another big one, that will help you develop e-marketplaces, will help you create electronic stores for your things. And of course, they can adapt to your norms and regulations in public procurement. Or if you want to develop, you just buy some tools from a lot of software companies that will help you do that as well. And you have a team like we had with the first wave of EGP systems. You have a very strong IT department that's devoted to maintaining and developing and constantly improving your EGP platform, and in this case, your e-marketplace platform. That's a decision that everybody has to do depending on their capacity, their budget, and their level of comfort and expertise on IT. And finally, the tricky one, if you decide to outsource like the US did, and you decide to outsource all your micro-purchasing regime to Amazon, to Alibaba, you have a lot of costs. And you have a lot of regulatory problems that now you need to negotiate with your suppliers and with, let's say, Amazon. If you award the supply of paper for $10 a ream, that's your awarded price, but out of those $10, Amazon will take $2 because that's how they operate. So those two come from the government, come from the public purchaser, come from a generic budget, from a contract with Amazon. Do they come from the supplier profit? What effect does it have if I awarded a contract in $10 a ream, but only $8 is getting to the actual supplier? Do they have legal basis to contest it? There's a lot of implications in terms of costs and transactions that you need to account for with these companies, because these companies have a lot of expertise and a very well-developed muscle in these negotiations. Then you have privacy and data concerns. As many negotiations have fallen here in Latin America, I'm not going to tell you which company, because that company wanted to own the data of all the transactions that were happening in the platform. And a lot of the data includes proprietary information in terms of technical specifications for some goods and technical specifications for some services. It includes definitely a lot of financial information from companies. And this company was adamant about owning that kind of information. And that was the breaking point in a negotiation with the government. So there's a lot of aspects to consider, and it's not as easy as to say, here's a credit card and buy everything from Amazon and Overstock, which is in a very simplified way what the American government has done. They have a threshold of micro purchasing from $10,000 and below, and they kind of said, like, below $10,000, we're going to be incredibly flexible. We need to mobilize the economy. We have a great program to purchase with credit card, Smart Pay, for control and monitoring. So we're going to let this be very flexible and see what happens. So during that stage, with a lot of concerns and a lot of monitoring from the academia, the geo and the supplier aspect of it, but they're starting an experiment that I think that only they are capable of getting away from. It doesn't work, because I think once you take this outsourcing step with one of these big companies, it's very hard to undo. And finally, the privacy concerns. Each country has different privacy laws and protection laws, and I would take that very into account if you're going to do anything with one of these companies. But basically, those are, in very broad strokes, some of the concerns, some of the benefits, and some of the great areas to think about in terms of efficiency, control, and even public policy when you're thinking about a blockchain e-marketplace. These are some very initial findings and very initial structuring of a document we're working at the IDB. And once we finish it, where we're thinking should be before the end of the year, have at least a final draft version, we'd be happy to distribute to all the participants of this conference. I thank you again, Galia, and everybody else who organized this conference, the ADB, and for the invitation and the opportunity to share our initial findings and to share something about our region or institution. And please feel free to relay any questions you have, whether it's by the functionality or by chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel, for your engaging presentation. It was good to hear and to have an overview of EGP activities and initiatives within the ADB member countries. It can help to generate reliable reports to better control purchaser and supplier prices and references, but there are a lot still to do. Now, again, I invite our participants to submit their question or comments in writing. We will address all of them. We'll try to address all of them because you have already some of them at the end of all the presentation. Now I would like to introduce the last presentation before the Q&A session. The COVID-19 pandemic has led to multiple challenges in procurement rules and procedures for almost all governments around the world, both in terms of urgent new activities or purchases and the execution of existing public contracts. Our colleague Lila Mallory will share with us the ADB's procurement support of the government of the Philippines. Immediately after, there will be one video on the new laboratory set up with ADB support and located in the north of Manila to increase testing capacity. And then a second video will give us an overview of the ADB's COVID-19 emergency food program helps to the poor in the metro of Manila. Lila, please, over to you. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Lila Mallory. I am Senior Procurement Specialist with the Asian Development Bank, and I cover the Philippines portfolio. It's really a great pleasure to be here with you today to share with you some of the superb work that the ADB has done in assisting the government of the Philippines through this COVID-19 pandemic. Now today I will be discussing with you two success projects that we had at the very initial stage of the pandemic in the Philippines when we went into lockdown. Instead of having a PowerPoint presentation, what I'll do is I will go through the projects, and then at the end of my presentation, we have two short videos that give you a bit more information and, importantly, photos of the recipients of this project. So with no further ado, I'll share with you the first project. So it was a $3 million grant that was signed right at the initial stage when the Philippines went into lockdown, March 13th. And the project was there to bolster the preparedness and the management of the Philippines government with this pandemic. So one of our first initial discussions is, how are we going to be able to do procurement? We were very well aware that the government had constrained human resources. They were working on a skeleton basis, and most of their offices were closed. Furthermore, the executing agency, the Department of Health, they themselves were working on a skeleton basis, and as one can imagine, was completely overwhelmed with having to manage the COVID-19 response. ADB, we had to be flexible and innovative, and we were very much aware that this was an urgent humanitarian impact, and we're talking about human lives. And therefore, ADB agreed that we would undertake the procurement on behalf of the government, and that we would sign all contracts and manage all contracts. Once this was agreed, then the next step was, what are we going to procure? What is the most urgent needs right now for the government of the Philippines? What is out there in the market? What is available? How can we do this in the most efficient and rapid manner, right? And we had two big challenges. One was, we needed, there was a very urgent demand, and two, the suppliers were limited. I mean, if one remembers back then at the very initial stage of the pandemic, there was a global shortage of goods, right? PPEs, testing reagents, ventilators. So that was a big problem. And how do we work around that to be able to get what the Philippine government needs in the time frame that's required? So discussions back and forth with the Philippines government. It was finally decided that the creation of a lab would be the best route to take to support the government with their management. Now, it was agreed that the Philippines government would provide the ADB with the specifications that they needed. They would then undertake the quality assurances of the delivery of the goods, and they would accept the goods. So we did a very thorough but rapid assessment of the market and identified a supplier that would be able to bring over the equipment, build the lab, bring the reagents, train the personnel here in the Philippines, and they were available to do it right away. They had the goods. But we had a problem, and this was a problem throughout other procurement with COVID-19, was transportation. How do we get the goods here? Now, they had the goods available, but they were not able to bring it into the country. And the main reason is, at that point, the Philippines was in lockdown, and many of the countries in the regions were in lockdown, and there weren't a lot of planes going around. So what we did is we coordinated very closely and worked closely with the government, and we were able to get agreement from the government to have a military plane pick up the goods at the location and bring them into the Philippines and pass the immigration. So to give you an idea, the project was approved on March 13th. On April 22nd, we signed the contract. And on that same day, April 22nd, we had the shipment of the lab arrive in the Philippines from the military plane. Now, in that plane, there was not only the lab equipment, but also the reagents and the personnel. So personnel were coming to make sure that the lab equipment was properly installed, and also to train the personnel, because we had Philippine nurses that were going to do the tests, but they had to be trained as to how to undertake the tests. So they came on the 22nd of April, and on May 9th, the lab was inaugurated, which is superb. It's less than a month. And and it increased the capacity of testing in the Philippines significantly. To give an idea, the lab can undertake 3,000 tests a day, which back then almost doubled the testing capacity of the Philippines. So it was a very superb, rapidly executed procurement that brought direct impact to the people of the Philippines, the government of the Philippines supporting the response. So a great executed project could not have been done without very close collaboration with the ADB and the government and the military. So that's a great one. And then our second project is it's a bit different. That was a grant, March 22nd, approved, and it was for highly vulnerable communities in the Philippines. So as I mentioned earlier, the Philippines went into complete lockdown. So people were stuck in their homes, but they couldn't go out to get food or water. They also were not getting paid because a lot of people were not able to work. And so we had a very big concern with regards to food shortages. And this project was there to support with that. The executing agency was the Department of Social Welfare and Development. ADB, again, we undertook all of the procurement and we signed all of the contracts. The difference here is that we were talking about food. ADB, we're not in the business of procuring food and distributing food, so this was completely new for us. And being able to manage that and ensure that what we were procuring was of good quality. So at the onset, we had to have a very close collaboration with the government. We worked with the executing agencies, I mentioned the Department of Social Welfare and Development, as well as the Army. So the executing agency provided us with a list of the items that they needed for us to buy. This ranged from rice, coffee, canned goods, powder milk, and so forth. Basically, needed commodities in a house to be able to have a family sustain themselves. Now, we had to identify suppliers, local suppliers that were able to provide the specific goods immediately, that they had them in stock, and that they were of good quality. Which then comes to our next big issue, was quality assurance. We had to ensure that the food that we were procuring was of a good quality to be able to hand over to the recipients, right? So we created a 3-point verification system whereby the goods were inspected prior to being procured. They were then inspected upon delivery, and then they were inspected upon delivery to the final recipient. Another issue we had was advance payment. Back then, it was very common, I think somewhat so now, but even more back then at the very initial stage of the pandemic, that suppliers required either full advance payment or partial payment. Now that's quite difficult because for us to be able to pay 100% upfront of the goods, we don't know the quality of them, we don't have assurances. So for the items that we were able to inspect prior to purchasing them, we were able to agree on a set figure of advance payment. But for the others, unfortunately, we could not, which then of course added to the burden and the difficulty of being able to identify suppliers that would sign with the ADB and agree to our terms with regards to payment. Overall, at the end, it was a very successful project. We were able to distribute to 147,000 households in the Philippines, food supply for 7 days, which is approximately 700,000 people. So another very good project. It shows you how, I have to say, ADB was very innovative. We were able to to put ourselves in a very new environment, tackle it, and successfully come out at the other end, and just really help people in the Philippines that were in dire need at that specific time, at the very initial stage of the pandemic. So with that, say thank you. We can watch these 2 videos that were created. Thank you.
So how was it possible that we could deliver upon this project so fast and so quickly? Well, it was mainly because we had so many committed stakeholders on board, internally and externally. So I was very fortunate to work with a number of colleagues that committed to this project, because we all knew that testing was the most critical investment for the country at this time. And externally, we had the same type of commitment with support from Department of Health, Department of Foreign Affairs, Department of Finance, Department of Defense, and of course the hospital, José Bielingga.
This laboratory is going to increase the testing capacity of the Philippines by 3,000 tests a day. That's 10% of the country's testing capacity target. And so it's an extraordinarily important initiative. It's an absolute critical piece of the country's strategy for creating a new normal situation in the wake of this crisis.
Is indeed a significant support in the national government's objective or goal to ramp up its daily testing output from an initial 300 per day, and now we're doing 7,000, and hopefully with this capacity we will be able to do 10 to 11,000 and continuously improve and increase our daily testing output.
Today we are actually focusing on the diagnosis of COVID-19 disease. But in our vision, this molecular pathology lab will also be a center for as a subnational referral lab for other emerging infectious diseases.
We don't know how long this will last. We hope it will be over very shortly. But during the meantime, we really need to help poorer people with income which is low for the household in the Philippines. So we decided to provide sort of assistance to provide necessity of food and other things for the people. To feel comfortable for the next couple of weeks.
The trucks line up are for those will be used to transport these relief goods to areas. Actually, yung target beneficiaries natin. We consulted with the SWD. Those parts ng areas na mahirap nila marating, yun ang target ng relief goods natin, donated by ADB. So we will see to it that there's no duplication, and we will really maximize itong donation ng ADB.
Pasalamat na lang po kami, mayroon pang mga nagbigay po ng mga ng relief food, kaya sa awa ng Diyos din po, nakaahon din po sa hirap, crisis po.
Many thanks, Lila, for these almost live and real-time feedbacks on our COVID-19 related operations. Congrats to you, congrats to the team from EDB and those on the ground. We all share the huge challenges caused by the unexpected needs for the pandemic. It was really inspiring. So as we are running out of time, I would like to ask only one question to each speaker that I've picked up from the chat and also from the Q&A session. I will start maybe with Kamawal. This is a question from Haji Mirwais. He's asking, it is quite clear to our stakeholders that the procurement processes are undertaken transparently and at the NPA, and we believe, they believe that your organization works are executed in a very transparent manner as well. But Haji has concern over the cyber violence as we export the data to your esteemed organization for its publishment on the website. So the question is, what security measures are in place to effectively provide protection against cyber attacks in order to preserve the data? Kamawal, over to you.
So, as I read the question right here from Haji Mirwais in the question and answers and also on the chat box, it has two parts. The first on the security itself, security of the data. We had a problem with digital infrastructure in the country. And after a thorough study, we found that to employ Amazon Web Services for the time being as a secured cloud for saving or for used for the data to be secured over there. But for the whole procurement electronic tendering process, software security, secure coding methods are being implied and considered for the to ensure security of the software itself. Organizational and institutional principles, including policies, are in place so that government officials will not violate and monitoring as well. We are conducting regular audits, internal audits, and security assessments of the infrastructure in the application and respond as much quickly as it is required. The second part of the question was about their data online, which is accessible to everyone, which will pose some security threats. Before we started to open data, we had a demand and supply analysis of the in the market, and this demand and supply analysis is actually conducted by coordination and cooperation with the civil society organizations led by APRO in Iowa, which is Afghanistan Public Policy Research Organization, and Integrity Watch Afghanistan. They were also involved. Private sector organizations were also involved, and we conducted detailed surveys and analysis. Three things were very important for us, which was considered, and based on those consideration, we selected which type of data should be public and which should not be public. Among those, one is the security threat, and the two others are legal and the commercial sensitivities. So those three are considered based on surveys and research conducted by a joint or cooperation of the private sector, civil society organizations, and the government.
Thank you, Kamawal. Very clear. So I know that there are more questions about the your presentation. To the attendees, we will make sure that Kamawal will come back to you after the presentation. Now for Lila, I have a question which is, I think, very relevant for any crisis situation and for many FCD countries. What are your main recommendations to ensure rapid e-marketplace readiness? To come back to our topics about the e-marketplace. So what are your main recommendations for a legal and institutional perspective, and also from the supplier's perspective? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So that's a very good question with regards to the market assessment. We are in a situation which is really unprecedented for our times. Most of us are trying to procure items that are not readily available in the market. The situation has improved substantially, I would say, over the last 6 months. But nevertheless, a lot of the major equipment that's required, for example, the ventilators and the X-ray machines, they're in back order. They're not available right now, and many of our countries need these goods. So it does take some time to really do an assessment, understanding what firms have these items and what firms have them in stock. Another issue that we've encountered is that the quality of the goods to be procured. Unfortunately, right when the pandemic hit, there was a lot of equipment that was available, PPEs, that were not of an adequate quality. So you need to ensure the goods that you're procuring are either WHO or FDA approved. Otherwise, you're going to have some concerns with that. Also, another issue is transportation. I touched on that a bit in my presentation. Transporting of goods, if you have a firm that might have those goods already available to be sent, but they don't necessarily have the means to transport them, then it's either identifying a third party that would be able to transport the goods, or working with the relative governments and trying to bring those goods into the country. And then with regards to the contract, we're really playing with tight timelines. We really want these items available yesterday, immediately. So having a very good understanding of the company that you are dealing with, and ensuring that you have a contract in place that allows you I'd say the control to be able to confirm when those goods will be available, how long it'll take for them to be transported and delivered to the final destination. That's really important. Yes, I think that's all I'd have from my side. So over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Lila. Indeed, it's really essential to look after the quality of the good, mainly for health sector, right? So yes, it's really sensitive, and congrats again to the team for the great work on the field. So to Daniel, the question is more about your recommendation, because Given your extensive experience and insights in e-marketplace, what is your, all over the several countries in Latin America and in the AADB countries, what are your recommendations before or prior to embarking on e-marketplace initiative? Thank you.
Could you repeat that last part? Any recommendation for?
The recommendation that you have before embarking on such initiative, based on your experience.
Yes, no, definitely. I think the most critical step for any country, any procurement entity, before considering doing a marketplace at a grand scale, is to have a very high capacity and a very developed expertise and human capital to deploy framework agreements. The successful countries that have deployed certain types of a marketplace, because I don't think there's a solid example of a country now operates under any marketplace logic. But the ones who have done semi-successful attempts to do it, it was because they have expertise in-house, so people who are used to deploying framework agreements, who are used to negotiating framework agreements, people who are experts in a sector. An example worth mentioning is the framework agreement for airplane tickets in Chile, because they created a marketplace for travel for the public sector, and they outsourced it to an e-marketplace provider called Despegar.com, which is like Expedia or Orbitz, or one of those companies. So e-marketplace don't have to be broad like Alibaba or Amazon or Rakuten. They can be also sector and industry specific. But the only reason that contract and that quasi e-marketplace succeeded was because Chile had a lot of expertise inside. They have people who've been doing framework agreements for airline tickets for 5 to 10 years. So they were in a good condition to negotiate with them. I think that's a good pre-qualification. If you're talking from an IT perspective, they also have to have a very sophisticated IT department in terms of not necessarily how many people, what kind of technology they use, or what kind of budget they have, but they need to have very competent people who are going to be in a good place to negotiate vis-a-vis big tech corporations. And these corporations sit on negotiating tables every week. They know they have designed their price and cost schemes to try to maximize their profit. And that not necessarily goes along with the incentives of transparency, of control and efficiency in the public sector. So you're going to have people in IT who know the midterm and long-term repercussions of signing certain agreements with these techno companies. As we found out 10 years ago when we were doing the outside development of EGP systems, a lot of people signed with Free Balance, with Ariba, with SmartStream, a lot of these companies, both in the procurement and in the FMS arena. But then they realized that the maintenance costs, the licenses fees, and the upgrading costs were very high, and were never budgeted, were never discussed, and never accounted for. Now you have all those costs plus other costs, a lot of transaction fees, delivery fees. They like these membership schemes where you get more value out of goods and service depending on subscription schemes you have. So I think those are the two big muscles that a procurement entity should have as a recommendation to just start thinking and planning towards a marketplace. First, a very high capacity to deploy framework agreements, and second, a lot of in-house capacity to negotiate and understand the cost repercussions of adopting new tech.
Thank you very much, Daniel. I'm pretty sure that our attendees has well noted those recommendations, which are critical for the success of e-marketplace implementation in their countries. Now, as we are out of the time slot that have been given to us, I would like to thank again, really many thanks again to our distinguished speakers for the insightful presentations, and also to all participants. Over to you, Roger. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Blandine, Daniel, Safi, Leela, for an insightful conversation and great presentations. So this concludes session number 9, our final full session of the event. So it is now my great pleasure to introduce a very special guest to share her closing remarks for this conference. Risa Tang is the Director General for the Department of Procurement, Portfolio, and Finance. She has been with the ADB for over 24 years. Risa is currently leading the implementation of the ADB's new procurement framework. Risa has served in various roles of increasing responsibility, including, but not limited to, Senior Consulting Services Specialist, Pakistan Resident Mission, and Head of the Portfolio Results, Safeguards, and Gender Unit. Prior to being appointed Director General of Procurement, Portfolio, and Financial Management, Ms. Tang led the Office of Administrative Services, where she provided strategic guidance to major initiatives such as organizational resilience, emergency preparedness, security, and organizational procurement. So I will now give the floor to Risa Tang.
Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, warm greetings from Manila. First of all, on behalf of ADB, I would like to express our sincere thanks to you for your active participation in the 6th APPEN conference, the first APPEN conference that we have organized virtually, considering the global pandemic situation. The highest number of participants we hosted in a face-to-face format was 104. And this year, we had 355 participants that registered for the event. 2020 is a remarkable year. The global pandemic has created multiple challenges for people, organizations, businesses, and governments around the world. At the same time, it also created unique opportunities for accelerating growth and use of digital technology. ADB has been at the forefront of this change. As a trusted development partner, ADB provided both financial support and technical assistance to its developing members, committing $20 billion as a response to the COVID-19 pandemic. ADB provided essential procurement support in identifying suppliers for PPE, critical food supplies, and testing and laboratory equipment. To facilitate project implementation during the pandemic, we have provided software as a service solutions to our clients in our member economies. We'll continue working with them on enhancing country procurement systems, including the establishment of electronic procurement platform. We organized this 3-day virtual APPEN conference in close collaboration with colleagues from the World Bank, European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, Inter-American Development Bank, Public Procurement Service of the Republic of Korea, and Open Contracting Partnership. In addition, insights from experts contributed to valuable takeaways from this conference. We are delighted to acknowledge the ongoing support and contribution of the Public Procurement Service of the Republic of Korea to the APPEN, our trusted implementation partner in setting up and strengthening the APPEN. We also highly appreciate the great contribution from all panel members and presenters of this conference. As we learned from the discussions held during these 3 days, there are many good examples on how electronic procurement could help countries in responding to COVID-19 challenges, improving transparency, efficiency, and accountability of public spendings, enhancing project implementation, and bringing procurement profession to a new level. We encourage all of you to think of an action plan for a short and medium term by taking 2 to 3 ideas on how to improve your country's public procurement systems to address huge development challenges ahead of us. We'll be sharing digital recordings of the conference in the days ahead, and we're always available to support your ideas. It is vital that we continue to work together as partners to maximize our efforts in building fit-for-purpose e-procurement systems that would help countries to rebound from crises brought up by the pandemic and rebuild resilient and prosperous societies. In closing, I would like to sincerely thank you all again for your active participation and wishing you and your families good health and prosperity. Thank you.
Thank you for your inspiring words, Risa. I want to take this opportunity to thank again also all of our distinguished speakers for being with us over the last 3 days at all hours of the day, depending on where in the world you tuned in from. We could see in your backgrounds, in some places there was a lot of sunlight, in many it was very dark. But we appreciate you sharing your ideas and your insights with us, all the work you have done, the areas of expertise that you possess. Those insights are incredibly powerful and beneficial for those who are looking to embark on a journey for the first time where you have already done that. And so we appreciate all of that. Thank you so much to our keynote speakers, Deborah Stokes and Risa Teng, for providing strong opening and closing to such a great event. We also want to give a special thanks to our moderators for driving insightful conversations throughout all of our sessions. Thank you, Sarah Cogrieve, Galia Ismakova, Joe Fagan, Charlene Shillingford-McKimmon, and Blandine Wu. We very much appreciate all of your hard work to draw out the greatest insights from all of our speakers. Thank you to the Eon team, the company behind the digital production of this event, for operating such a successful digital event for us. You don't get to see them, but they were behind the scenes making everything happen, and we appreciate all of their support and help. And a special thank you to the ADB event organizers who made this event possible. They were the people behind the scenes for many months before this event to make this possible. So you may not have heard from them throughout this event, but they were there making sure that everything operated and was executed perfectly. Thank you, Apple, Naide, Sarah, Michelle, Galia, for all of your help. And I'm sure there were many others that I did not get to interact with who were instrumental for making this event possible. We appreciate your hard work to make everything possible here. And to all of you, our guests, you've given so much of your valuable time to be here with us, tuning in from so many time zones around the world. And we absolutely appreciate all of your time and your attention. And we sincerely hope that we have delivered massive value to all of you in the form of new ideas, insightful advice, and relevant resources. Remember Risa's words here. This is that critical moment where you can take some of these great ideas that you jotted down, these great ideas that you made note of, and insights, and put them into action. And take that action right away. Do not leave the site of this week, this conference, without taking some form of action to commit you to making progress. This will be key to just increasing the probability that you will start making progress sooner rather than later. And that action could be small. It could be booking a meeting, reaching out to your team right now to say, hey, we need to start working on this right away. Start putting a plan together. Whatever that action might be, put it into place right now, so that way next week you already have momentum, so that when you begin the week, you can start taking more action. And personally, I want to thank all of you for the opportunity to serve all of you over the last few days as the Master of Ceremonies for this event. It has been a great pleasure to be here with all of you and from all over the world. So stay tuned for a follow-up email from the organizing team. One of the perhaps the most asked questions, which is a great question, was where can I get the presentations and the videos? And that says a lot about the content and about our presenters, because that means that there's a lot of value there and you want to be able to play it on replay as often as possible. So all of the videos will be compiled over the course of the next several days. And then next week, you will be contacted using the same email that you registered with, and you will have instructions for how to access those videos and the presentations that are available as well. So you'll have everything you need next week. So we just ask for a few days of your patience, and do stay tuned for that email address. Thank you again, everyone. And we wish you all the best on your digital transformations.